If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror, we'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hello there, and welcome back to The Disconnected. I am honored today to finally have somebody from one of literally like the biggest names in boutique Blu-rays right now, James Flower from Arrow Video. I mean, this has been a long time in the making, but thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. I kind of just for the people at home, Ryan first contacted me about this about a year ago when I was neck deep in producing the big Bruce Lee box set that came out last year, and so I wasn't able to do an interview then because I was too busy. But I'm glad we were able to make it happen now. So yeah, thank you for inviting me, Ryan.
Arrow is, I don't even know how to say enough about what Arrow has done over the last, I think we're going on really 15 years-ish of being a name in home video. And the last 6 or 7 years in particular have been a growth from, smaller films and smaller print runs to major sellouts of major mainstream titles. And we're going to get into a lot of that, but I mean, first, I really think we should get into James. What do you do for Arrow Video?
So the principal part of my job, I guess, is to be a disc producer. So, which in itself encompasses a lot of responsibility. So when Arrow acquires a film, it's then assigned to one of a team of producers, and our job from that point is then to essentially kind of conceptualize the whole thing from start to finish. So that includes everything from what the artwork is going to be, what the packaging format is going to be like, kind of in consultation with other departments like sales and marketing, what versions of the film are going to be there, just doing the research and figuring out what bonus features maybe have been on other releases we can port over, what opportunity there is for new bonus features, and choosing who and commissioning those as well. So, and just essentially kind of seeing the whole thing through from beginning to end. So right up to authoring and QC. There's not a kind of part of the process that we don't kind of have our hands on at some point or another, and it's a very you have to wear a lot of hats, and it's a very for a film geek it's an amazing job because it's ticking so many boxes in terms of one of my main things I've always loved is sort of the presentation of films and really getting into things like different cuts of the films. And, I mean, I've only been at Arrow for I think about 5.5 years. But I mean, before that, I was a fan of the brand from right when it started, and other companies before that, whether it was Anchor Bay or Synapse or kind of back in the DVD era. So this is the kind of thing I've wanted to do for a very long time. So it's been a real privilege to be able to do it. So that's the principal part. But then otherwise, I kind of play a slightly looser role in kind of working with other departments and representing the team of producers and consulting on acquisitions and all that kind of stuff. So it's never a dull moment. No day is the same.
So to sum up everything, James does pretty much everything at Arrow. With what you have brought to the table over the last 5.5 years, a lot of people are going to wonder how did you get there? Is there something that you studied to be able to get there? How did you get this skill set?
Not really. I mean, no one person who becomes a producer at Arrow has the same experience as someone else. It's kind of, people have been kind of come from all sorts of different backgrounds, from being reviewers on websites to being, working in sort of different fields, publishing. It's from my own part, it's kind of quite a long and windy road where, I've always loved film and wanted to work in film, and right from when DVD started, I loved DVDs. it kind of started out, I thought I wanted to get into filmmaking, and then by the time I finished college, I kind of realized that really wasn't what I wanted to do. So I kind of bummed around working in film festivals and stuff for a while, and then I did a master's degree here in the UK in film archiving, which is it doesn't exist anymore, sadly, but it was an amazing course to really change my mindset and how I look at film. So it's not just the films themselves in terms of their plots or their aesthetics or whatever else, but it's also film as artifacts, as pieces of 35mm film or 16mm film, and learning the whole chain of going from negative to positive and all that stuff, which really completely changed the way I look at things and the way I work. And from that, I then kind of moved to London and worked for 6.5 years for an independent film distributor called Soda Pictures, which then was later called Thunderbird, which was mainly contemporary art house stuff. But I also got to do some cool older stuff, some box sets for filmmakers like Jim Jarmusch and Kelly Reichardt, and I produced a kind of big all singing all dancing special edition of a kind of cult horror film called The Reflecting Skin, and that was my kind of Arrow audition piece. And eventually Fran and the rest of the guys at Arrow noticed, and there was a job that came up, and I got the job. And not to divert too much, but like kind of at that point, sort of 6 years into working for this other company, I so badly wanted to work somewhere like Arrow and didn't think it was ever going to happen. I thought you had to kind of know people, and they didn't really seem to, advertise. So I kind of thought, well, I'm going to start my own little label. So I even got to the point of registering a company and acquiring the rights to a film. I got acquired Over the Edge, sort of film from 1969. And was ready to do it when, lo and behold, Arrow advertised the job. And so I kind of had the crossroads moment of, well, do I go for it or do I try and make a success of this other thing? And I went the Arrow route, and I continue to be glad I did. Over the Edge came out through Arrow eventually, but yeah, it was it's been occasionally tough, but mostly very rewarding 5.5 years at Arrow.
Man, I got to admit, for somebody trying their own label, Over the Edge would have been an incredible first title.
I thought so. It was that thing of what's a movie where the HD master looks pretty good.
Yeah,
you need a ton of work, and it hasn't come out anywhere before, and it's it could sustain me that all the hard work and all the risks and stuff. I could be like, okay, I need to at least put this one out. This would have been great, but yeah.
Well, and not to mention that's one that a lot of people were begging for a long time.
Well, I don't know if you've seen the Arrow edition that eventually came out. Yeah. It was a labor of love, and a lot of people came to it that way, and I was very proud of how it all came together.
Nice. So yeah, you've been there now for the last 6.5 years or 5.5 years. Lots of stuff has happened with Arrow over that time. Fran, who you mentioned, is now over with Radiance. The Hut Group has stepped in with Arrow, and Arrow has exploded. I mean, there's, there was some bigger box sets. The Russ Meyer thing came on before you were out there. There was a couple bigger titles. But really, these last couple of years are the mind-numbing, oh my gosh, how are they getting these releases type of titles from Arrow? So it's a really good time to be attached to them, it sounds like.
It is. I mean, it's the company's kind of continually adapted and changed in the relatively short time I've been there. I mean, when Arrow Video, I guess, started back in 2010, it was just an offshoot of Arrow Films, which was a company that had been around for 20 years by that point. They were just kind of doing odd little bits and pieces here and there, and there wasn't really a kind of a boutique industry yet in the UK. That hadn't happened, and so it was. I think it was just a thing of one guy a guy called Almar went to Alex Agran, who was the CEO of the company, and said, "Oh, you've got the rights to some good cult films like Dawn of the Dead and some other bits and pieces. Why don't you try and create a brand around them?" And shortly after that, Alex has made the very wise idea of bringing on board a bright young thing called Fran Simeone, who really is just, I mean, like, Fran's only a year older than me, and I don't know how he's done so much in kind of he's being a relatively young guy. He's one of these people who has so much kind of vision and kind of energy and so many ideas. that it's quite intimidating to be around sometimes. But he's one of the smartest guys, knows so much about film, and he deserves so much credit for bringing on board the right people and really pushing forward and growing Arrow as a brand, as a company, through things like hiring people like James White and Ewan Kant, and eventually many years later myself, and really leading the charge with commissioning new restorations, which was something that was not commonplace at that point. And then eventually making the move to release in the US as well as the UK. So these are all things that have accumulatively over time kind of led Arrow to be in the position that it now is. And, we were one of the first companies to do it. And so I think that has been a big help. I mean, in terms of the more recent changes over the last few years, so Alex sold the company to the Hut Group, and well done for saying that, and not Zavvi, by the way. That's a common mistake. We weren't bought by Zavvi. Zavvi is another company that THG at that point owned. They don't anymore, actually. They sold off Zavvi and a bunch of other brands, but they wanted a film distributor in their portfolio, and they bought us. And there was initially there was a lot of kind of anxiety about how that was going to work and what that was going to be. Because I've worked for a company that's been bought out by a bigger company, and then that's not gone well, and other people had as well. So there was, it seemed like an odd fit, and there was some other kind of economic anxiety that kind of added to that too. And then eventually with Fran leaving, and eventually other people have left as well. So Kevin Lambert, who was sort of Fran's number 2 for a long time, he's gone as well, as has Ewan Kant. He's gone to Vinegar Syndrome. It was kind of, the company had a little bit of an identity crisis for a while, which, hopefully was not clear to you guys, the guys who are kind of doing the stuff and buying it. Hopefully this is all stuff that we could, keep behind the scenes and, make sure that it didn't really affect your guys' experience. But there was a bit of, it was quite a turbulent period, just trying to figure out what Arrow was going to be without some of the people who had really driven the brand up to that point. And those people, they're not necessarily, they haven't cut ties completely. Like Fran still, has done acquisitions for us on a freelance basis, and he's played a key role in a couple of really big deals that you're going to see stuff come out in the next year or so, which is very exciting. And Ewan is doing stuff for us as well, on top of his Vinegar Syndrome work. It's but yeah, we've after that kind of turbulent period, we've managed to find a kind of new way of working. We've brought some new key people on, like Cliff McMillan, who obviously co-founded Shout Factory and worked there for a very long time, and now he is at Arrow, and he's kicking butt. He's doing some great deals for us, and it's. I mean, obviously, there's been an evolution in terms of the kind of the types of films we put out and the amount of films we put out, and I think there's sometimes when you see people who kind of mourn the Arrow that was 5 or even 10 years ago, I'm on the one hand, I'm sort of sympathetic, but on the other hand, I'm like, surely you must have been paying attention that this kind of, it hasn't been for a very long time. And, I think there's a lot to be excited about in the future in terms of our, the kind of the output that the things you've kind of talked about before with some of the exciting big stuff that we've done. We're building on that, and we're going to do more in the US and more on UHD, and we've got some big major studio deals coming up that have given us access to things that we never ever thought we would get. In the same way that once upon a time the idea of us doing Tremors or The Warriors or some of the other things that we've done in the last few years would have just been exactly, that's a fantasy release right there. So we're all still kind of pinching ourselves that came to light. So as we are so many other stuff coming along. But yeah, it's like I say, turbulent probably would be the word. It's been stressful sometimes, but I think we're in a good place now where there's some really exciting stuff coming up, and yeah, I can't wait for everyone to see it.
So this turbulent period, this is something I was going to try to touch on ever so slightly, and I'm glad you brought it up. But there was a period for Arrow where there was some disc replacement programs. There was. I'm not one of those people, but there's plenty on social media where every single month Arrow will post these announcements for some pretty good titles that a lot of people love, and yet 17 people will post on Facebook, nothing for me this month. Where's the Arrow of
Those
old?
guys.
This
Yeah,
is awful. I like you. I sort of sympathize with, they were doing smaller titles and giving a whole bunch of love to things that people had never heard of and lifting those up, and that's great. But now, like, some of our favorite movies of all time can get that same amount of love, and the studios trust Arrow to do that. Why would we not celebrate that?
Well, I think to touch on a couple of things that you brought up there. So yes, there was a kind of rough period where there were quite a lot of QC issues and disc replacement programs, and every now and then something big QC wise does come up, like the issue that's just happened recently with one of the Coffin Joe films. There you go, very prepared, Ryan. It's very good, and I love the visual aids there. That particular period, that some of that turbulence was partly due to. One of the things with THG and kind of, there's been a ton of speculation, or there was when the deal started over, how it was going to affect Arrow in terms of the way it was going to change the company in terms of the types of films it was going to require and all that kind of thing. And that was never the case. They've never, ever interfered with us in terms of saying, don't acquire that kind of film, acquire this one. I don't think they know enough. That's not the business that they're in. They don't really, they trust us to get on with that. The ways in which it's kind of affected the way that it's affected us has been on a much more kind of admin kind of internal thing of stronger IT security, and there was a hiring freeze at one point, and so we were understaffed, and I think that contributed towards the QC issues. The things that kind of don't outwardly manifest themselves into the kind of the front-facing experience that you guys have, but they're important to us to work at the company day to day. But that was then, and we're at a place now where the company gets it more, and they understand us more, and they're offering more support, and so that's played a big role in some of the big swings and big hires that we've been able to do recently, like Cliff. It's in terms of QC, that's always. Again, this is something I don't want to sound too defensive over, because there's always one thing I would say in our defense, without wanting to sound too defensive, is that I don't think we've ever made the same mistake twice. I think it's always been a thing where something really unexpected has come up that has really is pretty much unforeseen. And the Coffin Joe thing, for example, for those who don't know, the issue there was one of the films, the subtitles stopped a third of the way through the film. Now, we QC that film and the subtitles played all the way through. That's not a case of we didn't watch it. It's something that happened, as I understand, during the upload of the disc that then wasn't caught at the manufacturing stage. So that's just one of it's a really bad luck, and it makes us look bad. But it's one of those things where, every time something like this happens, we talk about it constantly, and we, institute new procedures and new ways to make sure it doesn't happen again. And then after a while, something else happens, and it's something that I don't want to sound defensive, but I also don't want to promise that there'll never be any issues again, because it's inevitable in this business that. There's going to be some, and particularly when you're doing what we do and kind of trying to pull together these really complicated products and trying to push what some of these discs can do, particularly with UHD, which is a relatively new format, and we're still figuring out some of the bugs, some of the things that don't, that still take us by surprise. I think that is, every now and then something's going to happen. Hopefully it'll come to the point where it's happening less and less and less and less, to the point where it's not being anticipated and discussed quite as much. Because certainly, again, coming from a producer's point of view, where you work so hard on these things to try and make them, and this doubly goes for the Bruce Lee packaging drama, which I am still angry about, because I never got a real decent explanation as to why and how that happened, and that's something that was the cause of, I worked harder on that thing than I worked on anything, and so it was a real bitter blow for that to happen, and took a little while for me to get over. But it's Fortunately, it affected far from everyone. And although I absolutely sympathise with the people that it did affect, fortunately, once they were able to get inside the box and see what was on the discs and have the kind of the rest of the experience that we'd mapped out, they were, I think, by and large, very happy. So, we are still, like I said, that's the thing. We are constantly, we're not complacent about these things. We're constantly learning and studying and trying to figure out like I said, the best way to make sure that this is something that happens less and less and less. And hopefully we're getting to that point now.
I'm glad you explained part of it, because one of the things I wanted to ask, which I sort of understood with some of the things that I've dealt with in my own life in the past, but with the Hut Group acquisition, there were so many people, making assumptions of they're going to tank Arrow, they're going to make them put out the worst films out there, they're going to ruin the packaging.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's as you say, we've all seen it with other companies, so yeah.
It's the sound of it. It's a bigger company that wants to make money. I mean, why would they not try to invest in something like that?
No, and I mean on the one hand, yes, you will see more of a skew in some ways towards major studio deals, and there'll be, there are some films coming up that when I heard about them, I was like, oh, really, that? But it's all part of a kind of an eclectic patchwork of stuff that is very on brand and very along the lines of the stuff that we've always done. And, yes, the Hut Group, they have, targets that they want us to fulfill. And, but it is, we're aware of that. And, it's all, we're still also very passionate, as are they, about not diluting the brand and about, giving the audience the same experience that they've always had and emphasizing the things that have always been important, like technical excellence and, the quality of our restorations and our extras, and not kind of compromising on that experience. And so, yeah, when yes, I'm sure there will be people who will, hear about some films that we've got coming up and be like, oh, Arrow have sold out or whatever. But, those guys always do that, ignoring, 5 or 6 other things that are along the lines of what we've always done. So, I mean, it's not, we tend to just ignore them and just kind of get on with our jobs. Because, I mean, really, the ultimate, and not wanting to sound too corporate and misery about it, really the ultimate arbiter of kind of whether we've succeeded in these things or not is whether they sell. And
exactly.
And business is good. So either, these people are bitching but still buying it, in which case, whatever, or they're bitching and they're not buying it, but we're still doing very well, in which case, who cares? I mean, it's...
exactly.
And, the thing I would say to that as well is, there's so many more companies now. But, it's a very crowded field compared to even where it was when I started. And so
right.
if you don't like that we're not doing some of the same films that we used to do, well, Vinegar Syndrome is doing those now. Radiance is doing those now. It's not, we're far from, we don't have to release all the films.
Right.
And I guess it's kind of a backhanded compliment in a way that, the kind of people who criticize some of our choices of acquisition are kind of, they're doing so because they know that we would do them really well and they just want us to, but it's, we can only kind of do what's available to us and what kind of works for us as acquisitions. And within that scope, we will still, approach it with the same care and detail that we always have done. So, and, the audience is growing as well. It's kind of amazing to hear people who are only just now getting into the physical media game, whether it's partly off the back of like the things that Christopher Nolan has said, which obviously has launched 1,000 think pieces, which has been great for us, but and kind of very validating. But yeah, it's kind of amazing to, the last couple of years I went to Texas Frightmare and kind of manned the booth with a couple of other people from the Arrow team, and that was extraordinary. Kind of going thousands of miles away and meeting people who love our work, and again, some people who have come to it pretty recently, and people, because we've been around for a long time, you kind of figure that our fans have been around with the whole journey, but that's definitely not the case. We're picking, if we're losing people, we're also picking up some along the way as well. So it's, adapt or die. I guess that's the kind of the main thing, isn't it?
And potentially picking up more. I mean, the way that things have grown since, this is kind of one of the good things that came out of the pandemic, but a lot of people being stuck at home seem to ramp up the physical media buying. And that has led to some of these incredible releases that likely never would have been thought possible. I mean, we're getting great boutique releases of literally some of the best films in history, like The Warriors that I just showed. Or, I mean, even this, like, we were told for years this was not possible. And yet Arrow delivered something that is, once we get the subtitles on one disc, an incredible package of some of the most sought after cult films of all time in HD.
And that stuff is very exciting for us to do. And, again, it's like us being bought by THG does not preclude us from putting out a Coffin Joe or something like that. It's, but it also allows us the resources to go after the Warriors and Conan and some of the other biggies that, again, would have just been off the table not even that long ago.
Exactly. So on that note, and to really heap praise at your feet for a minute, 2023 seemed like not even just a return to form, but like a leapfrog over where Arrow ever could have possibly been in the past. And there was something about this last year that was special. It was tangibly different for Arrow, and the releases seemed to be higher quality. The film choices were remarkable and shining a light on things like Coffin Joe getting announced, or even films that a lot of people knew, but so many people in this generation had never seen, like Barbarella. Like, this is an incredible release. This is a magnificent release of a film that was not being talked about by most people. Did it feel different behind the scenes? Did 2023 feel like a special sort of coming to terms with the new power of Arrow Video?
Yes and no. I mean, I say no. I mean, we had a kind of behind the scenes, things were quite kind of, like I said, turbulent and stressful, with some people leaving and having to carry on that work with, while being kind of understaffed. So there were logistical challenges, and, with trying to deliver a very ambitious slate kind of without necessarily all the support that we needed. But I mean, it was, I think despite all of that, knowing that we had, this amazing Paramount deal with Barbarella and the Warriors coming up, and Bruce Lee was a real kind of watershed moment in terms of, for me, that one was, I knew that was a sort of once in a career opportunity. So it was like, okay, if ever I'm going to give 250% into a project and, work evenings and weekends and do all of that stuff that I usually am kind of strict about not doing, that's the one. And it paid off in spades. And, it's I think knowing that kind of Arrow has its place kind of in doing some of those big projects is, it's great to kind of work for a market leader, someone who kind of people look up to as a kind of company that, and not to dismiss other companies who do extraordinary work as well, and all different levels of the industry. But it's a real privilege to get to do that, for sure.
Well, with something like the Bruce Lee box, I imagine that it has to feel great seeing everybody responding and literally saying, forget Criterion, which is the grandfather of all boutique labels. This is the box set to go to for anything Bruce Lee if you are a fan, because it is that good. How did that feel for something that you're putting all this work in? Because, man, this is literally, I don't think people understand it just yet, but this is literally one of the best box sets in history. It's incredible.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, yeah, it felt pretty good. I think, one of the things that came up when we acquired the films, and initially our ambitions for it were kind of much more modest. We thought, well, okay, we can do UHD, so let's essentially kind of do the Criterion set, but in UHD. This is before any of us, had done the research and kind of figured out sort of possibilities of what else we could do. And it's really that process. I mean, that's where, because that's my favorite part of really of all of this, is when you're really hunkering down and figuring out the kind of the do's and don'ts and what people have screwed up and what they've done right and how to combine the best of all approaches, and just, figuring out what this thing is and how to position it and what to do with it. And, I had the Criterion set already, and, at that point, I wouldn't necessarily call myself a Bruce Lee fan. I'd seen a couple of the films, but I didn't typically know. So having to do like a deep dive and really get into it was really interesting. And that kind of threw up all these possibilities of what you could do, which and some of the opportunities that, Criterion didn't take, which I think was partly mandated by the fact that they were producing it around the time the pandemic hit. So that restricted what they could do to some extent. But we were in a slightly more privileged position kind of further down the line of being able to actually look at what they did and look at what others had done and decide, we're going to take a slightly different approach. We're kind of, because so many of the extras that had been done previously weren't really to do with the films themselves. They were more about Bruce Lee's life, of which the films are a relatively small part. They only really were made in like the last 3 years of his life. So It's 2 years, really, last 2 years of his life before he died. Look at me, I'm already forgetting everything. Like, it's all the you do these big projects and then all the knowledge falls out of you once the thing's finished. But we had a few really big breaks there. One was that we were able to go back to the original negative scans and really kind of do those restorations from scratch and do the work into figuring out what original versions looked like and, being able to present them that way, which Criterion hadn't been able to do by that point when they did their box set. And then a couple of really amazing and completely unexpected fluke discoveries, which were the discovery of what we called the Mandarin cut, the longer original theatrical version of The Big Boss, which originally just came completely by chance. We'd asked Fortune Star, who were the licensor who hold the rights to Golden Harvest films, for, if they had like a tape source for just like Mandarin audio, because we weren't happy with the source that we had. So we thought, okay, maybe there'll be something better on the tape. And they sent us a tape, and it turned out to be a 25-year-old telecine scan SD PAL of the longer Mandarin version. And, I sent it to, because Brandon Bentley was already working with us at that point, and I sent it to him going, okay, don't lose your shit. I had to make at that time Brandon had been working for us very long, so I had to create a screener with his name plastered all over it. Right. But yeah, and then we found out that not only that, but they actually had access to the original print that tape was made from. So we were able to go back and get 4K scans of that. So that was one thing. We were already pinching ourselves with that. But then we also, because one of the films we were restoring in 4K was Game of Death. So the 1978 film directed by Robert Klaus that kind of used a little bit of the footage that Bruce Lee had shot in 1972 for Game of Death, but is mostly its own thing. And we were restoring that in 4K, and that was fine. And, I knew that there were alternate Asian versions of it with different footage. And so we were working with L'Image and Ritrovata, the lab in Rome that kind of, along with their Hong Kong division, had done the bulk of kind of the work on the masters that Criterion had done, and they'd scanned those negatives years ago, and said, do you have any materials relating to these alternate Asian versions? And they said, oh, no, I don't think so. We've got some dailies or something, but no, I don't think so. And I swear I did a triple take looking at my computer. I was like, what? It was like, can you please send us some MP4s of what those are, please? And they did. Literally the first thing that came up was the log fight, which was just this lost fight scene that had just been essentially a rumor that kind of, up until last year, I'm sure most Bruce Lee fans would have sold their grandmas to be able to, get a glimpse of that. And so it was we messaged Fortune Star and said, can we use this? Can we put it in a documentary? And we're like, yeah, okay. And it's just, so that then ultimately became a sort of mammoth, nearly 4-hour video essay called The Final Game of Death, where we presented all of the footage and with narration on top, unfortunately read aloud by me because it was too late to get someone else to do it, but narration nonetheless. And Brandon and I then also edited together a new assembly of what the footage might look like if it had been completed in the early 70s as a short film for Golden Harvest, and which was an approach that had not been done before. And I that thing nearly killed me, but seeing the response was totally worth it. And it's by no means perfect. There are certainly flaws in it that are all testament to my inexperience when it comes to things like dubbing, and but it's nonetheless it exists, and it's whereas I'm sure if you gave fans the choice of a flawed thing that exists and it not having it all, I'm sure they'd take the flawed one. So I'm glad that we were able to give that to them all the same.
It is a magnificent release, flaws and all. I understand that the rollout was painful for you, I'm sure, to hear everybody's troubles. But man, when it finally got in the hands of everybody, and the passionate fans about Bruce Lee could go, hold on, this is maybe the most special thing ever. It was kind of magical to see that wave of everybody getting it and realizing our lives kind of just changed by this.
It was, I think it was a watershed moment for us, as you kind of said earlier, in terms of realizing, okay, this is sort of the, and I guess the only thing I can compare it to really would be a few years ago when we did the Gamera box set, this kind of, which, again, initially we had very modest plans for, but then we brought on this very bright young artist called Matt Frank, who just did these incredible artworks to go on it, and it just completely galvanized us to kind of think of, okay, well, what else could we do with this? How much more, what could we do with this, and how big could we push it? And I think that it went from being like I said, a fairly modest release of what to most people outside of the tokusatsu fan community is just like a Godzilla ripoff or whatever. We didn't think there would necessarily be that much demand, to the point where we had completely underestimated demand and we'd sold out before the release date. It completely took us by surprise. But I think that's, indicative of an approach where, I think people respond to effort and they respond to passion. So if you can bring that to the table, and if you can imbue that in the product, into what you're doing, it's not just a re-release. It's not just, slapping some fancy packaging on something, on the same old product, and not really, paying attention to what you're doing otherwise. It's really giving people the opportunity to get on board with something special and kind of definitive, which is, I get it as a fan myself. I see it with, some of the stuff I buy where it's just irresistible.
Right. Well, with that passion, I would love to hear about these last 5.5 years, other than the Bruce Lee box, which we could both just probably spend the next 4 hours discussing. Sure. What have been some of the ones that you've worked on that have been, for you, that most, I'm going to give it everything and put into this and make sure that the fans love this as a definitive release?
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, the first one, I remember my first day at Arrow, I was sat down and sort of told what projects had been assigned to me already, and in the middle of this list was Robocop, and I was like, wait a minute, Robocop? The original Robocop? Not the crappy remake, the original Robocop? And that was a real trial by fire in terms of it was my first real experience working intensely with studio approvals. So at that point, MGM were, and I think particularly given this was such a big key title, it's what they still regard now as a franchise title. This kind of thing nowadays, they don't actually allow companies like us to produce new bonus features for a title as big as, or what they call a franchise title, like a Robocop. So we kind of got in this kind of fortunate window where we were able to do it. But that thing became a full-time job in itself in terms of, again, very big ambitions in terms of the amount of new extras we wanted to do, the new having the 2 cuts. That was a real kind of statement of an intent for me, I guess, anyway, in terms of this is how the passion I'm going to bring to it, and this is proving myself within the company. I think that thing came out within my first year at the company, and I think I'd already kind of earned my keep by that point. So that one I'm still very proud of, and especially when we did the UHD upgrade a few years later, that we were able to go back to the admittedly still very rough, but still original film elements for or the surviving film elements, I should say, for the unrated footage and upgrade that portion of the film for the director's cut. But yeah, that was a big one. Gamera, as I just said, that was another one. The Sure Scope box sets, in terms of their size, I mean, that came about because, I'd done Gamera and had a great time really researching and understanding and engaging with, as I said, the tokusatsu community, so the fandom that is very passionate and engaged with, and very organized as well in their love of Japanese special effects movies and monster movies, and they were so helpful to me when I was doing the Gamera set. And I thought, okay, hopefully when the possibility of doing the Shaw Brothers sets came around, it was like, okay, I would like to see if the Kung Fu fandom community is the same, and it was different but no less passionate. I mean, it's right. It's not quite as organized in the same way that, I mean, the tokusatsu community have a Wikipedia that they update that was full of stuff that I referenced every day, whereas really a lot of the Kung Fu stuff was a lot more outside of my comfort zone and needed a lot more research and understanding who the people were that were experts in this, and also trying to innovate as well, because Eureka and 88 had already done a lot of great work already in terms of bringing those films out in the UK and working, finding out people as well. But I didn't just want to copy what they did. I wanted to find people who hadn't had the opportunity to do commentaries or essays about these things, and, with all of that, kind of give a slightly different approach. And, I think we succeeded on that in Volume 1, and, Volume 2 was a little bit more of a mix, and right now I'm in the early stages of planning Volume 3, or we're in the early stages of production on that, so that's going to come out towards the end of the year, and will hopefully be just as exciting as the first two. Those ones are great. Like I said, Over the Edge, in terms of being able to actually bring that as a passion over, that was really cool. And that like the documentary that Elijah Drenner produced for us on that, where he was able to get Zoom interviews with pretty much all the surviving cast and crew, it felt like so many people, including right up to Matt Dillon. I mean, I was very proud of how that came out, and so that was a real dream project. So I'm sure there are plenty of others I'm forgetting, but yeah, those ones will do as a good kind of representative sweep of what I've been fortunate to do in my time at Arrow.
Elijah Drenner is a masterwork. I don't know how he does some of the stuff that he does, but he is a brilliant documentarian behind the scenes, and I'm so glad that he's getting, he's more, I believe, full-time with Vinegar Syndrome now, but yes, like that. Full-time
Vinegar Syndrome. He's doing a last project for us now, which is an ongoing thing that has been on and off for a couple of years now, which will be coming out later this summer. But he's, as soon as that's finished, then unfortunately we won't be able to work with him anymore. But he's been one of my favorite collaborations in my time with Arrow, because I was a fan of his already. I loved his Dick Miller documentary and some of the stuff he's done, and right away it was very I could tell that he was simpatico, and he was someone that would have a really great working relationship with. So being able to work with him on Over the Edge, Robocop, and the John Hughes films that we did and other stuff, it's been a very rewarding collaboration. Absolutely.
And he seems to know everybody. That's the easiest thing. He's got hookups with everybody. It's wild.
Him and Heather Buckley and some of the other people that we do, they have very good Rolodexes full of, so it's great. That's what you really need. You need, and especially on a project where you're not sure what to do to start with, where you don't really know what the thing should be, and you could just say to him or Heather or Gillian Horvath or one of the other filmmakers we go with, well, who do you think you could get? What could this be? And within a day, they come back to you with some pictures, and it's like, great, do that.
Makes your job easier, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So speaking on some of these films, I would love to hear the background on some of what inspired you to love film to begin with. What were some of the films when you were younger that really sparked that creativity with you?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, the first film I ever saw in a movie theater at the tender age of 6 was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So one of the first things I ever saw on a movie screen was the Golden Harvest logo, which is a good kind of harbinger for everything that's come since. And that, I mean, in that in particular, I really remember there was a sort of TV report on the Jim Henson special effects and the animatronics, and that blew my mind in terms of thinking, oh wow, there's a story behind the films themselves. There's a real that captivated me, and so I really became interested in special effects and how film worked, and I would just read books about films that I would not see for many, many years, and in some instances still haven't seen. But it's it's just that I know them through the books that I read, and it became a thing where I consumed as much as I could. And my parents were still quite strict about what I watched in terms of horror movies, which made me want to see them even more. And then after a certain point, when I was about 12 or 13, and they were like, I'm sure it'll be fine. One of the real watershed films I saw was David Cronenberg's The Fly, which I saw when I was 13, and that movie just, horror films were something that was very fun but kind of reasonably superficial in terms of my appreciation of them. But then, The Fly, I couldn't stop thinking about it for months. And I don't even know if that's in my top 5 Cronenbergs now, but it's still. I love that movie still, and it's one of the most, just in terms of films that had an impact on me, that's certainly one of the hugest. And I mean, I really got into things like, this being the late 90s, American independent cinema was all the rage, and so I was catching up with, all of those guys, and including Robert Rodriguez, who we're working right now on stuff, and it's, from then on, it's just been, like I said, a kind of a bit of a windy road that's taken me through to production and then film festivals and archiving and other stuff. And I mean, it's kind of ironic that my favorite 2 genres to watch kind of in my spare time are horror films and westerns, which Arrow does no shortage of, but I've not gotten to do many of them. I think most of what I've done has been action films, really, which, I mean, I'm not complaining. It's been, like I said, a real privilege, but kind of ironic as well. But I think, I think if I kind of had to trace so much of it back to that kind of that viewing of The Fly and when I was 13, and that being a very formative experience.
The Fly and Ninja Turtles. What a wonderful 1-2 punch.
It'd be there are 2 films I'd love to do, but they're just whether the rights aren't available or whatever. Particularly, The Fly obviously is owned now by Disney, which it's one of those things that we hope that one day they'll see sense and kind of open the doors to the Magic Kingdom and let us have at all these Fox titles that are being held to ransom, essentially. But not today, not yet, unfortunately.
That brings up something interesting, and I'm just going to ask just because you're UK based, so maybe this is way off base to ask at all, but maybe you can shine a light on something that a lot of us in the community have been wondering. The UK gets a lot of really over the top studio releases direct from them, and nowhere else in the world do they do that other than the UK. For Warner Brothers does it a lot, like that big Exorcist Bible edition they did last year. Do you know why it's only in the UK? Do you know why it's like a proving ground of they can release those there and yet no one else can get them?
I don't know, to be honest. I think it's if I had to guess, I guess it would just be a mix of the UK physical market still being very strong. It's it's obviously in a mainstream context, it's still declining year on year, which is the trend that you're seeing everywhere. Right. But through the efforts of companies like Arrow and Second Sight and 88 and Eureka and Radiance and all the rest of them, there's still a lot of excitement there, and it's a mix of studios working very closely with chains like HMV, who fortunately are still around, that can then they want exclusives, and it's still very lucrative here in the UK in a way that maybe it isn't quite. I don't know. I don't know the US side of the business as well enough, so I don't know to what degree Target or whatever the kind of. I know that we do a lot of work with stuff with Best Buy and Barnes and Noble, and they've been obviously Best Buy not so much now, but Barnes and Noble certainly has been a great supporter of ours, and we. But yeah, whether that just there's not quite that connect kind of on the US, I don't really know, I'm afraid.
I have a feeling there's just one or two people in charge of the UK division behind these studios, and they just really love home video, and they're like, yeah, let's put more into it. And then,
well, I think that is true anywhere. I mean, particularly with, when you're dealing with major studios, what you really need is a really strong advocate in the studio to kind of help make it happen. So that's certainly the case with companies like, Warner Brothers. I know that there's, it's essentially one guy who I know has these great relationships with Criterion and Shout and us as well now. And, there's, it's the same. I think you just need someone who can, break down doors and kind of make stuff happen, because otherwise you just kind of get this sort of inertia that kind of, because otherwise, I don't know, people are afraid of making decisions or something, but,
That's true. One thing that I really wanted to hit on is with we were just kind of touching on it with the home video declining year over year, just at least a little bit. It's this first time in a long time over this last year that I've finally felt like we might finally see a little bit of a rise in the next couple of years. I felt more hopeful than I had been previously, and that's not to say that I'm ecstatic that streaming is going through some hard times, or that the studios are losing money hand over fist behind Disney Plus and whatever. But are you feeling like there might be some optimism on our horizon?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I mean, it's an unpredictable business, and I mean, good luck trying to do a 5-year plan. As we tried to, it's all predicated on stuff that we have no control over, whether it's manufacturing plants still being in business, or in terms of, obviously we're throwing in our lot with major studios, quite not entirely, but quite a lot in the moment, and that's entirely predicated on studios just still wanting to be in business with companies like us, because all of a sudden, whether it's because of a merger or just because they're understaffed or whatever, they might say no. We have worked with Sony in the UK for a few years, but now the UK home entertainment division is essentially shut, so there's literally no one to license us films in the UK anymore for Sony. So we're still working with them in the US, but it's a different division in the UK, and so you're not going to see Sony licenses in the UK in the future, and that's really sad. And I mean, you hope that that's not going to be a trend, and you hope that studios are going to see and the value of their librarities. I'm aware this conversation is very driven towards kind of major studios, and obviously
that's totally fine.
We still work with independents a lot, and independent rights holders and companies around the world, not just in Hollywood, who have been incredibly rich sources of films for us to put out. But yeah, I think in terms of going forward, we've I don't think you can kind of be complacent and say that any business, even ours, is recession proof, but we've been very lucky, and we've I think Arrow is certainly in a strong place in terms of having the resources and the contacts to be able to kind of survive some of those kind of headwinds and have backups, but and to kind of carry on doing it until it stops making sense. I don't know, but I mean, it's funny. When I first moved to London, kind of 12 years ago or something, there was a panel, there was a talk being held at the BFI called "The Death of DVD?" That had like the BFI and Second Run and someone from Eureka there, and this is even before I'd gotten into the business, and there was they're already saying, well, if we're lucky, we've got another like 3 to 5 years or something. And, like I say, it's about adapting or dying. And kind of, I think as long as you can adapt and innovate and find different ways of doing things, then I think hopefully you'll be okay. But yeah, again, there are things that are beyond our control, such as what major studios decide to do, whether the major studios even exist, and manufacturing plants. But I don't know, I feel like hopefully, because I mean, a lot of us companies in the sector, we're friends, and we're I think there's some competition, but I think by and large we're all it's all that old cliche of the rising tide lifts all boats. It's we're all invested in making the industry work, and even if it came to the point of taking control of the manufacturing stage of things ourselves, in the same way that Arrow has its own authoring house. that to kind of, directly have control over our output and what we do, to the point where even just this week, I've been QCing our first in-house authored UHD. That's something that will allow us to author more UHD so that, we are not just at the mercy of David Mackenzie's schedule. God love him, because he's very in demand, and he's we want to do more than he is physically able to do. So that's not something we've done lightly. We've done everything we can to make sure that we do it properly. And Leroy, who's our guy doing it, is incredibly talented, and I think he's done excellent work with his first one, which hasn't been announced yet, but will be soon. And I'm excited for people to see it and to embrace it and hopefully be excited as we are. But in terms of the future, I mean, good luck making plans in this business. But we are certainly continuing as if we'll things are going to be okay. And I think having those relationships and those resources is key to that.
Imagine when you first came on at Arrow, if you were making a 5-year plan, how much would have went out the window because of what's happened?
I mean, a pandemic and people. I mean, there's all sorts of things that just wouldn't have. UHD, even we hadn't even started doing at that point. Right. I mean, I was so keen for Robocop to be our first UHD, but I mean, even back then, it wasn't really feasible. There were, for whatever reason, we couldn't do it back then, and we needed to wait. I guess we wanted to wait until we could do it right. And I mean, this is we've learned a tremendous amount along the way, and it's what we launched with Pitch Black and Flash Gordon, and those were two great titles to launch with, and we've not looked back since. And I mean, UHD is one of these things that's really reinvigorated the industry to the point where our market share is very very UHD heavy. It's if people have a choice between one or the other, they pick UHD. Overwhelmingly so. So you are going to see more titles on UHD, more UHD upgrades, more new stuff that is driven towards UHD and 4K. And, as long as that people are telling us that's what they want, that's what we're going to do.
I've loved a lot of the output on UHD. They through Arrow, I can say that they, for the most part, look freaking amazing. They are mind blowing. But I really want to put to bed something that's been a complaint about Arrow for a long time, and you already touched on it. Some of these titles that have come out on Blue, Arrow has released on 4K a couple years later, and every conspiracy theorist out there will go, Arrow planned this all along. They just wanted to get your money on the Blu-ray and then charge you again for the 4K. And first of all, I always say, you don't have to upgrade. They're not making you pay anything.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Is this, I mean, can you explain how that's probably not the plan to begin with?
It's definitely not the plan at all. I mean, we, if we can do 4K from the start, that's what we're going to do, because that makes the most financial sense to do. Right. The idea of kind of doing a Blu-ray and then ripping people off of 4K later is just completely counterproductive, because you would make a lot more money to start with if you just did a 4K. In terms of, because obviously we were, so we started doing UHDs in, what was it? It was mid-2020. So, and from then on, I think, obviously we've upgraded stuff that came out before, because, we didn't have the opportunity to do UHD at that point. So, I mean, if we can do it, then why wouldn't we? If that's what the audience wants, then we want to give it to them in the best possible quality. I mean, there are films coming up in the schedule that we released in 2019 that, had just, they've just missed that cutoff point. And, I don't think we do it a couple of years later. I think we wait a few years more. But, I think, as you said, they don't have to buy it, and I think it's there. We're all about choice, and if giving people that choice. So, I think our policy from now on is to, if we're going to do 4K, we do it from the start. So, I don't think off the top of my head I can think of an example of anything since that mid 2020 cutoff point where. We've done a Blu-ray and then done a 4K later. Someone, I'm sure, will correct me, but I mean that would be a freak occurrence, because definitely our preference is to get it right the first time.
And for the most part, I would agree. It seems like the choices being made, they make sense. And some of the upgrades, like 12 Monkeys comes to mind. It's a movie that it's going to do better. It's going to look much better on 4K, and it deserved that sort of an upgrade. Not to mention, it's a big title. That's a well-known film. A lot of people are going to buy it. It makes total sense to do something like that.
And I mean that our restoration department is on fire. They're in a really strong. It's two other guys called James White and James Piercy. So the three of us together are a joke. It's no one knows who's speaking. It's but they know so much about what they do, and it's just it's one of my favorite collaborations working with those guys. And it's when you're talking about discussing the ins and outs of restoring a Bruce Lee or a Conan or something. That's when you pinch yourself and say, I get to do this for a job. This is great.
That's so true. And I mean, you brought up Conan, I think twice already. That set is selling like crazy. I think it's already out of print from the distributor in the US.
I think so, yeah. It's, we knew it would be big. And hopefully, again, it is just one of these cases of people responding to the hard work that we put in. Because, we knew that we wanted to make sure that we got it right in terms of everything from adding new extras and having the different versions of Barbarian and fixing the sound mixes because they were both cursed in different respects, and we care very deeply about, like I said, trying to get it right and giving the definitive presentations. And I'm sure there are ways you could kind of nitpick, and that's fine. People can kind of people can have very valid opinions, and that's okay. But it was one that we really wanted to get right, and it was a title that had been discussed on and off for years, and we were told it wasn't going to be possible, or it was off the table, and until eventually finally it was. And we wanted to make the most of that opportunity, and so to hear that people have enjoyed it as much as they have and is very exciting. That's doing things like the putting together the Basil Polidorus isolated scores for the first one, because that the music in it is absolutely insane, and we wanted to highlight that and really showcase that. And everyone came to it with the same passion and the same love for the movie that we did, and I'm really proud of how that came together.
It's a remarkable looking release, and mine actually just came in. I don't have that one on hand. I'm not prepared. I'm sorry.
We've got a fun weekend ahead anyway.
Yeah. So a couple more small things. One thing that I was always curious about, and I know that this is not going to be the same, so I'm just looking for an average if possible. Do you know the average print runs for some of these limited editions? Because we always try to gauge how well the industry is doing with Arrow, because a lot of these, the Coffin Joe says, it's selling really well. We don't know what that means. We don't know how many are being printed. I
don't know. I only know some of them. I mean, I like something like Psycho, for example, which was UK only, but that was UHD and Blu-ray, and I think there were 10,000 of those across like those. But I mean, we're always kind of looking at sort of the trends and how things are changing. Right. And I know that we've been maybe too bold in the past, and so I know that Sure Scope 3, for example, I know that we'll be pressing less of them than we did 1 and 2, because 1 and 2 maybe hung around a little longer than we were hoping that they would, but are selling out still eventually. But I think that we were, and it's not necessarily about FOMO, which is kind of making sure that we're not being wasteful and that we're kind of just actually catering to demand. So I think, it's always a drag when these things sell out quickly and there are people who want it and can't get it. That's, it's, again, that's something that's kind of beyond your control, but, hopefully what's on the disc and what's left for the standard version that comes out later is still, good enough to be some compensation when
I agree.
The all singing, all dancing version isn't necessarily available, or if you only come to it later on.
So before I get to, a final little thing that we'll talk about, wish list title, other than The Fly or Ninja Turtles, something that you would love to produce for Arrow, no budget, no studio offline, you can go to anybody. What is that one title that you go, I want to put everything I possibly could into this?
Oh man, I mean, I'm sure there's tons. Geez. I have weird ideas in my head for things like a kind of an all-singing, all-dancing version of Creepshow that has Stephen King books and comic books and all kinds of crap in it. And, in terms of films that I'd love to work on, I mean... one of my favorite films is William Friedkin's Sorcerer, and I'd love to upgrade that to 4K and give that a kind of big multi-disc treatment. But I mean, I have kind of weird ideas that, I've got an idea for an Orson Welles box set that I'm taking to the company soon. That it might not happen. It might be, it might not be quite what anyone wants to do, but it's again something that I think would work for a part of our audience. And one of my big wishlist ones that probably won't happen is a movie from the 80s called The Wizard of Speed and Time, which is it's written, directed, and starring a stop-motion animator called Mike Jitlov, who is working with the Academy Film Archive at the moment to preserve his films. So there's some hope that a preservation of that film will happen at some point, but it's I know has been kind of distrustful of distributors in the past because he had bad experiences. But hopefully, I don't care even if it's us who do it. I want someone to do it. Someone needs to do it justice, and hopefully someone can make him change his mind, and that movie can come out at some point. But certainly, but yes, The Fly and Ninja Turtles, they are two of my big wishlist ones for sure.
I know you probably can't say any specific things, but are there any teases that you could possibly give for the future for the audience?
What can I say? Like I said, more UHDs, a couple of big major studio deals, including a studio that we've not really done very much with before, but that we've just done. We've done a huge deal with, and already I'm talking about another one. J horror, maybe some K horror. I don't know if that's going to happen, but hopefully, Short Scope Volume 3. Exciting stuff coming up.
I am very excited, and if the beginning of the year is any way to gauge what the year is going to be like, we're in for a treat. I mean, the Conan sets, the Coffin Joe box landing, all of this is overwhelming. I mean, there's so many good things out there; it's impossible to stay abreast of. But Arrow seems to be on the forefront right now, and I just appreciate all your hard work and taking the time to talk today.
No, thank you very much, and thank you and the fans for all of your support, and as long as you guys appreciate what we do and are willing to buy what we do, we'll carry on putting our hearts and our souls into it.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Hopefully we can talk again soon.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Take care.
I am Adam Lundy, co-host of They Live by Film, a podcast dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. Every week, my co-hosts Chris Haskell, Zach Bryant, and I discuss a wide range of films, from monumental classics like Vertigo and The Rules of the Game, to the craziest, schlockiest movies ever made, like Deathbed, and everything in between. We are also lucky enough to have sat down with some of the biggest players in the boutique Blu-ray and film restoration game. If this is your thing, then come hang out with us every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, wherever you normally stream your podcasts, and now as part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Thank you for listening to the Disconnected Podcast. There's one big thing that you could do to help the show, and that is to leave a rating and review on the podcast service of your choice. Thank you.
Hello!
This is Matt.
And Emily from Scarecrow Video in Seattle, Washington. Did you know that we have the largest video collection in the world? We have over 146,000 titles and growing. That's over 3 times more than Netflix, Amazon, Max, and Hulu combined.
Plus, Scarecrow now offers rent-by-mail service throughout the U.S., so check out scarecrowvideo.org for details. You can catch Emily and I, or Matt and I, if that was going to be you saying that, on our bi-weekly YouTube show, Viva Physical Media, for video recommendations and so much more.
See ya!
Bye!